2 dots. Okay, so about 8 lines from the bottom of Nun Zayin Amud Bet. Ira dam hapar l'toch dam hasair. Tanan. So now we have done the 7 sprinklings, 1 and 7 on the inside, 1 and 7 on the outside, towards the parochet, not on the parochet, although there was an opinion that it was directed on the parochet, but towards the parochet. And now we're going to the Mizbeach HaZahav, the golden altar, and there you're going to put on the 4 corners and 7 on the top. So just to contrast this, by the way, an issue we discussed yesterday, also comparing it to like certain types of korbanot that are brought inside the heichal, like the par helam davar shel tzibur, the ox brought when the entire people sin based on a ruling of the Beit Din. So there it says you do 7 on the parochet, as opposed to it was 1 and 7. That was a point that was made by the Tosfos Yeshanim. By the way, the Torah here by the Yom Kippur is not clear that you do it on the parochas or what you do it on the parochas, but presumably we learn from that model, and and that's our interpretation of you should kein yaseh lo moed. So you do 1 and 7 on the parochas, as opposed to a normal thing that was done on the inside would be 7. And then here you're going to do on the 4 corners and 7 on the top, whereas a normal one that was done on the inside, you would just do the 4 corners, not the 7 on the top. Now, when you are doing the ones on the parochet, the psukim say, you says, right, when it says you do on the kapores, it says, first it says you do the par, then it says v'shachat et ha'seir, ve'viat hamo mil bibeit laparochet, v'asat damo kasher sal dam par. So that clearly the par and the seir are separate. You even shech the seir after the par. Then it says v'chein yaseh lo moed, which is the same 1 and 7 on the inside, 1 and 7 on the outside. The same way they're separate on the inside, they're separate on the outside on the parochas. Although the Gemara dealt with what happens b'diavad if they get mixed up. Now the question is going to be what happens by the mizbeach. So the pasuk says v'yatzal mizbeach asher lifnei Hashem v'chiper alav v'lakach midam hapar midam ha'seir v'natano konot mizbeach saviv. And the question is, what does that mean? At this stage, are you taking from them both combined, mixed together, or are you doing one thing from the dam hapar and a separate thing from the dam haseir? Then it says v'zala min adam be'etzba'o sheva pamim. So when it says finally the 7 times, it's min hadam. So at that stage, there's no question they're mixed together. When it says the 7 times, it says you take min hadam. So there's only one blood, they're mixed together. But how about when you're doing it on the corners, midam hapar umidam hasair? Is that the 2 of them mixed, or is that each one separately? And that is the debate we're about to see. Our Mishnah says you mix them, but we're about to see that even before the corner, even for the sake of the corners, we're about to see that's a debate. So let's take a look. Tanan, our Mishnah goes, Kamanda Amr Ma'arvin l'kranot. Not only would they be mixed for the 7 on the top, which we're going to get to, but even for the corners. The Idmar, it was taught Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yonasan. Chad Amr Ma'arvin, one says you mix them, but Chad Amr Ein Marvin, you don't. It's time Rabbi Yosef who Damar Ma'arvin. Rabbi Yosef will be the one that says that you combine them for the corners. The Amar, because we know elsewhere in general questions of interpreting the psukim, Rabbi Yosef says, "Afagav delok siv yachdav, commander siv yachdav dami." As we mentioned yesterday, a vav in the Torah is often ambiguous. It doesn't mean and or. So, for example, when the Torah says "Umakeh aviv imo mot yumat," does it mean only after you've smitten both your father and your mother, or does it have to, or does it mean your father or your mother? So clearly, sometimes it means or it means this by itself and that by itself, and sometimes it means combined. So, we would say, well, it depends on context. But the Gemara assumes that you have to have a default. What's your default assumption before you try to look at clues in the context to tell you maybe it means something different than the default? So Rabbi Yoshia says the default is that it means combined. So obviously he has a pasuk from Makeh aviv imo to tell you it means separate, or he learns out from context and from other clues it means separate. But his default is to say it means combined. So again, that statement is Afagav delok siv yachdav. The unit that didn't explicitly say combined. Command siv yachdav dami. Our default assumption is that it means combined.
So when it's corners, do you mean the corners at the bottom of the mizbeach or the
No, the kranot, the horns, fine, the horns. You're right, that's more accurate. Sorry, the horns. Okay, so he says even though it doesn't say yachdav, it's like it doesn't. So the default is it means combined. So when it says dama par and dama seir, it means combined already. By the time you're doing the horns of the altar, they're combined. Okay. So the Gemara says no. Afilu Tamer Rabbi Yonasan. It could even be Rabbi Yonasan, who normally says that you assume it means separate. Shani Hachad Dichsiv Achas. it says achas, meaning what does it say? So this is not so clear that this is directly in this context, but after this it says, the kilami gapers kodesh, where is it? Much later it says, much later, right at the very end, it says, "V'ayisazos lachem," the very end, like 20 psukim later. "V'ayisazos lachem l'chukas olam l'chaper b'nei Yisrael mikol chatosam achas b'shana." So somehow he says that achas, written much further, not clearly in the context of this, is still saying that it's combined. And some of that achas combines them. So that's a pretty big stretch. But it says, you could say, even if normally you don't say it means mixed, maybe you get from the achas, thank you so much, that comes much later, that it means mixed.
No,
so
Rashi,
let's
Rashi says
the kippur no kana sav achas b'shana. Where is it? Oh, Shmot Lamed. Oh, thank you. That makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
So that's by the Mizbeach Hazav. Thank you, Michael. By the Mizbeach Hazav in Tetzaveh, it says making the Mizbeach Hazav. It says V'asisa Mizbeach. V'asisa v'nasatal lifnei adut tzarach v'ktiyaron k'tor samim v'alosa v'nasim losa right. V'chiperon al konasav achas b'shana midam chatasa kippurim achas b'shana yichaper alav v'gosechem. Thank you, Michael. Yes, that's much more in the location what we're talking. It says there at the end of the Mizbeach HaKtoros, the making of it in Tetzaveh, Aaron will atone for it once in the year from the blood of the Kippurim. So the once he is saying, and it says achas twice, is saying that you combine the atonements. You do one act of atonement. Thank you, that makes a lot more sense. You do the bloods together on the Mizbeach. So you could have learned it from there, regardless of how you normally interpret avav, whether it means combined or separate. Okay, Tanya de lo kishinuyan. We taught a brisa not like our answer, meaning that it's not about the achas, it's about how you normally, but that it's Rabbi Yoshia is in his normal position that vav means combined. What does the Brayta say? That they should be mixed. Again, not because it says achas, just the simple fact that it says both means mixed. That's what Rabbi Yoshia says. Rabbi Yonasan, on top of Nun Chedem and Aleph, Rabbi Yonasan Omer, no, exactly as we would have predicted. Rabbi Yoshia says that it says this and this, it means combined, and Rabbi Yonasan says it means separate. Amelo Rabbi Yoshia, so Rabbi Yoshia said to Rabbi Yonasan, "V'lo kfar nemar achas." So now Rabbi Yoshia is saying the way the Gemara would read is, look, according to me, just the fact that it says A and B means combined. You, who normally don't think A and B means combined, but it says over there in Tetzaveh, it says once, one atonement, so you obviously do it once, not twice. Amelo Rabbi Yonasan said back to him, "V'lo kfar nemar midam hapar midam ha'seir." No, because if it wanted to say once, it would have said midam hapar v'hasair. Since it says midam hapar umidam hasair, that's to say dam hapar is separate and dam hasair is separate. So actually, I read from the pasuk. Not just normally, I read a vav as not meaning combined, but the fact that it says separately midam hapar umidam hasair means separate. Okay, im kain lama never achas. So what do I do? You're insisting. Oh, it says one atonement means you combine them and you do one atonement. No, right. Lo malacha, well, that's true also. Lo malacha, but that's how you're reading it, the emphasis of achas. Lo malacha, achas v'lo shtayim midam hapar. Achas v'lo shtayim midam ha'seir. It means you don't do it twice from the blood of the ox. You don't do it twice from the blood of the seir. Each blood you do only once. But you don't, it's not that you do all the bloods combined in one act. Okay. Tanya Ida, we done another brisa. V'lakach midam hapar midam ha'seir. Shumu ravim zeh b'zeh. Okay, again, Rabbi Yoshia, midam hapar umidam ha'seir. A and B means you mix them together. Atam hashumu ravim zeh b'zeh. Oein el mizeh b'ifnei atzmo mizeh b'ifnei atzmo. Maybe it means A by itself and then B by itself. Especially as we said, it says the word midam a second time. Tamad lomar achas. No, because if you had any doubts, it also says achat at the end of Tetzaveh, which we're interpreting to mean again not just once in a year, but one atonement. V'stamak Rabbi Yoshia, so that bright is going like Rabbi Yoshia. Joseph points out, it's the fact that it needs achas might not be going like Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia could have done it just with the vav, but at the end of the day, the opinion there that you mix them together, that's the Rabbi Yoshia opinion as we've seen. So there are two reasons to say you mix them together. One, how you normally interpret a vav, and number two, the fact that it says once, it says the word once twice over at the the end of Tetzaveh to underscore one act of atonement, and that's Rabbi Yosha. But there still is a position of Rabbi Yonasan that you only mix it when you get to the top. When you're doing the horns, you are doing them separately. Yes.
Rabbi, is Rabbi Oshaya attributed as the Mesader of Brightot? Or Tosefta?
Rabbi Chi and Rabbi Yosha, no, Rabbi
Oshaya is attributed
Rabbi
as
Chi and Rabbi-
Mesader or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember, the Tosefta or the Brightot?
What is it? The Lotana Bei Rabbi Chi Bei Rabbi Yoshia, no, isn't it? Rabbi Chi and Rabbi Yoshia are the Brightot, are the
So it's
Toseftas.
interesting that you got a series of Brightot and Rabbi Yoshia.
Yeah.
That's all I'm
And
saying.
they're arguing over who.
Yeah. The thing it's Rabbi Chi and Rabbi Yoshia that are I think the Mesadrei Tosefta, the Brightot. Yeah, I can double check, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. So now you've mixed the two together. You pour now it's quite interesting actually, because remember the blood of the ox is bigger. So I would have imagined is more quantity. So it says, if you remember the language says, you pour the blood of the ox into the one of the goat. If anything, I would have thought you pour the one that's smaller quantity into the one that's larger quantity, just for the issues of spillage and all those types of issues. But the last thing you did was the goat. You did the goat on the parochet, or in front of the parochet. So that's the one you're holding. So you pick up the damat's paw and you pour it into it. Although still, I would have said you pick this up and then... Anyway, but that's the way the Mishnah is. So it must be that even if there's a greater quantity, even if the goat is lesser quantity, the size of the bowls must have been similar.
The same size bowls?
Well, they must have been similar, because if you're mixing them, they must have actually been big enough to accommodate both, because you're mixing them. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so you last did the seir, you take the par off of the pedestal, you pour it into the goat blood, and then it says you reverse it, like when you mix things well. You pour one, like somebody said, like Sheva brachas, right? You pour it this way, you pour it that way. Okay, so right, so Jonathan said that.
Lift such a bowl with one hand.
Well, I have no idea.
Not with its hard blood.
Look, this would make a lot more sense if you didn't say you caught all of the blood. But the fact that we've been assuming you catch all of the blood makes it harder to really, envision. Anyway, after you're done, after you pour the ox into the goat, then you pour what's the full into the empty, the mixture back into the empty. So, Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. Rami Bar Chama asked Rav Chisda, and you'll see how this will tie it. In normal case, forget Yom Kippur, you put one receiving bowl into another, and you use that for the act of Kabbalah Adam. So you had a bowl inside of a bowl, and the animal was shachted, and the blood came out, and you caught it in the inner bowl, but you were holding the outer bowl. You were right, because one was fit into the other. So what do you do? So what's the halacha? Mahu. Min b'mino chotzetz, do we say a one type and its own type will still be a division? It's a bowl and a bowl, but nevertheless, that's an obstruction and a division, and therefore you're not considered to be touching and holding the bowl, and the Kohen has to hold the bowl. Oh, eino chotzetz, or maybe it's not a chatzitza. Amarle, he said to him, Tanitua, we taught it in our Mishnah. Nasanas hamali bereikan. So you put the full one in the empty one. So he understood what that meant was, not what we said. My love, Hoshiv Mizrak Male, Letoch Mizrak Reikan. What it meant is you took the full bowl and you put it into, not you poured the contents, you put the full bowl into the empty bowl. Now that would be bizarre. What would be the point? It's okay, you could read the Mishnah that way, but why would you bother doing that? Why all of a sudden you want to hold two bowls? Anyway, that's what he thought it meant. And then you're going to go and you're going to, put it on the altar. So it's an avoda that you have to be holding the bowl. And so presumably there's no difference whether you're catching the blood or placing the blood, and you can be holding it through with another blood in the bowl in the way. So, my love, does it not mean Hoshiv Mizrak Male, but Letoch Mizrak Reikan? You put the full bowl into the empty bowl. No, that's not what it means. It means Ira Mizrak Male, Letoch Mizrak Reikan. So you poured the full bowl into the empty bowl. So the Gemara says, Hatamale Reisha, we already got you mixing it. Ira Dama Par Letoch Da'amasio. You poured the blood of the cow, of the ox, into that of the goat. No, today Lavan Yafi Yafi. You want to pour it back into the empty bowl to mix them well, which is clearly the pshat of the Mishnah. Otherwise, as Michael said, what would be the point, even if it meant to put the full one? Okay, so that's why we're discussing this, because it was a possible read of our Mishnah. But now that we're discussing it, we're going to focus on this question. Can you have one bowl in another bowl? Do we say min b'min or chotzetz or not? So let's take a look. It says, Tashma, come in here. Hayomi Agabi Kli or Keli, if his Kohen was standing on a vessel, this is a normal case, normal day, doing the avoda, but he's not standing directly on the floor. And he would normally be barefoot on the floor. And the idea is that the same way, that the floor of the mikdash imparts sanctity, it has to also, he has to be connected to that floor as well. Same way you also need the body, the person of the Kohen, the body of the Kohen to be touching the vessels. All these are seen as like types of, klei sharet. By the way, the whole idea, nowadays you talk about like a rabbinic staff of a shul, you talk about them as the klei kodesh, right? So that idea, look, a lot of this is in the Torah already. When the Torah speaks about, you go through this whole process of sanctifying the kelim in the Beis Hamikdash, right, through these korbanot and the sprinkling and the Shemen HaMishcha, and you also then sanctify the Kohanim. So the idea is that their bodies also becomes a type of a klei sharet. So the same way, so therefore you have to be, it's about also what is where their body physically is directly in contact with. So their body has to be in contact with the floor, and their body has to directly be in contact with the klei sharet and with the, with the other things that they are using. And that's why there's an issue of chatzitza. So it says, Haya omer agabe kli, if he was not standing directly on the floor, but he was standing on a vessel that was between him and the floor. Oh, agabe regel chavero, or on his friend's foot, okay, one foot on the other, pasul, and he was doing the avoda, it's invalid because he was not directly touching the floor. So that seems to be a proof that min b'mino is chotzetz, because it's his foot and his friend's foot, and it's considered to be an obstruction, even though they're both feet. So they're both, body. So the Gemara says, don't you see their min b'mino chotzetz? So the Gemara says, no. Shani regel dulo matzi mevatale. No, a foot is different because you cannot annul it. What does it mean you cannot annul it? It's like the guy says, look, excuse me, I'm going to need my foot here. You can't basically control the other guy's foot and keep it there for as long as you want it. So therefore, its ability to be considered to be well, okay, there's a question about what mevatale means. In general, I mean, not what it means, but the significance. In general, there's a question about a chatzitza, right? What is the concern? I mean, how do you conceptualize the idea of a chatzitza? Because I'll give you an example, where this plays out. The halacha is, if you're not makpid of something on your body, then it's not chotzetz. I've got this thing on my body, but I don't mind that it's here. So okay, fine, then it's not a chatzitza. Why is that? It's still preventing, the most normal case is when you go to the mikveh, it's still preventing water to get on your body. Why? Just because you don't care that it's there, but you're not makpid, is it not a chatzitza?
What do you mean a thing on your body? A scab?
Yeah, let's say a Band-Aid. Yeah, a Band-Aid. Okay, I want it there, right? Perfectly there. That's why I have it on. I want it there. I don't want it off, so it's not a chatzitza. Okay, why is that? So there's two explanations. One is that it's not enough that it prevents the water from getting on your body. To be defined as a chatzitza, it has to sort of actively have an identity as a foreign body, as an obstruction in a foreign body. So even though in practice this is preventing water from getting on my body, it's not a foreign body because it's only foreign if I actively don't want it there. If I don't care if it's there or not, it's not considered a foreign body. That's one idea, that it has to be labeled a chatzitza. The other idea goes into the opposite direction. It says, no, actually it's a problem. Water isn't getting on your body. But if you don't mind, then it becomes considered like tafel, secondary to your body. It becomes considered like part of your body. And therefore, even though water doesn't get on your body, it only gets on the Band-Aid, but the Band-Aid now is part of your body. Now, there's a huge gap between those, because one says it's only a problem when it's actively defined as a chatzitza. The other says, until you can define it as part of your body, okay, then it's going to be a problem. So the difference is the whole huge middle scenario, right? That I don't want it to actively be part of my body. I'm not defining it as part of my body. On the other hand, I don't actively want it off. And a lot of the debates, by the way, in contemporary halachas about chatzitza have to do with where you fall on that divide. Like a lot of people would actually say Band-Aid is a chatzitza, because even though I don't mind that it's on right now, eventually I want it off, and we can't really call it part of my body. So that's like the debate. You have to call it part of your body to make it okay, or do you just not have to call it an obstruction, and then it's an okay? So what's this idea of not mevatale? So the easiest thing to say mevatale is if you, by a chatzitza, need it to be considered part of your body. So here by the kli, you would need it to be considered like to become part of the kli. So I can't make your foot part of my body. Your foot is always going to be something you're going to want to keep to yourself, right? If I got two vessels, I can say, yeah, they're combined and it's all the same thing. It's all like it's one big thing, like it's one big vessel. It's min b'mino. It's not foreign matter, right? It's not a foreign object. It's all the same min. It's all one, but not your foot. Your foot is always going to be separate. That's the easiest way to understand lo mevatale. But the other way is, even if you understand like the idea that is it like a foreign body, lo mevatale could also say that. It's one thing when it's my vessels, or the Beis Hamikdash's vessels, but nobody minds what I'm doing with them. I could say it's not foreign, it's not out of the place. But your foot is something you're always going to want to take away, right? So therefore it always has a status of something foreign. And therefore, even if it is min b'mino, it always remains a foreign thing, and therefore it remains a chatzitza.
I understand how you
Okay?
say other vessels, part of your vessel, they're clearly made separately. I mean, so
Right.
you're saying that temporarily you can define it as that.
Yeah, so that would be the idea, which is, I understand, that's actually the harder way. There's more reason to say that it's just enough not to be a foreign body. It's harder to say that all the things that are in chatzitza are becoming like one with the thing. Rashi is cute. Rashi says, Rashi says, "Dulo mevatale chaveiro es raglo ad sheyigmor avodaso." I'm not going to let you stand on my foot until you're done doing what you need to do. I'm going to want it back now. So therefore, that's different. That will always be a chatzitza. Okay, so let's go look back at the Gemara. Okay, igadami. Some say hachabay mine. Here's the question. Derech sheirus bekach. Oh, ain't derech sheirus bekach. Chatzitza, I'm not bothered. I'm going to assume it's not a chatzitza. It's all min b'mino, by the one vessel and the other. It's all the same thing. It's all considered one thing. It's not as foreign. It's not a chatzitza. But the question is, when you do the avoda, it's lamod lisharet. It has to be a way of serving. And is it considered an appropriate way to serve, God or, a master, to do one vessel in another vessel? So maybe the problem is in the action, not so much in the physical connection.
So
Okay.
chatzitza is now no longer.
It's assuming chatzitza isn't the problem, and it wants to know is it the problem of just the action of derech sheirus. Okay, so derech sheirus b'kach or ain't derech sheirus b'kach. Maybe that would be unique to the issue of avoda the Beis Hamikdash. For other halachas, min b'mino wouldn't be a chatzitza. Okay, Tashma coming here. The Tana debate Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel teaches as kol kalei hashares asher yishartu bam bakodesh. All the holy vessels that they will serve with them in the plural in the holy. Shnei kelim, two, bum, v'sheres achas, one, asher yishartu, right, they will serve with them. So as opposed to saying multiple services, no, one service with multiple vessels. So, shnei kelim v'sheres achas, so that seems to be the conclusion. A, it's not a chatzitza, and B, it considers to be derech sheirus bekach, which is fascinating. You could have assumed either one was a problem. The Gemara seems to say both are okay. So, Rabbi Bar Chama and Rav Chizah. So, Rabbi Bar Chama asked Rav Chizah the following question: sieve b'toch hamizrak v'kibo bo sadam mahu. Let's say you put a sieve, what would you call it? A wick? Not what do they make like those wicker baskets out of? Wicker. No, I know. But what's that called? What? Bast. Anyway, something like that palm. What do you call that whole? The thing is like the thing that anyway. Palm bast. Bast. Anyway. Okay. There you go. Palm. Anyway, so one of these types of a porous material, right? A plant type of porous material. Sieve is like a vine that grows around the tree, right? So it's right now it's chotzetz, but if you leave the blood in long enough, the blood will seep through. Right, and that actually is also a very important halacha by chatzitza, something that is water permeable, even if water isn't getting through right away. One of the hardest questions about chatzitza for mikvah is person with an ear infection, a woman with an ear infection, because you can say, well, you put in a plug and I need it there, but how could you say that it's like it's eino machbid right now? Sure, you want it in your ear right now because you need to protect your ear, whatever, but the whole point is to keep the water out. So how could you call it not a chatzitza if its whole function is to keep the water out? So it's a question how to deal with that. So, Rabbi Yosef's basic approach is that even though its purpose is to keep it out, since you need it now and you need it for health purposes at this state, right now it's considered part of your body. Rav Moshe basically talks about sort of coating a cotton thing with Vaseline and putting it in your ear, and that the Vaseline will keep it tight. But he says, but because it's cotton, and eventually, if you were in long enough, the water could eventually get through the Vaseline and permeate. And therefore, since it's theoretically possible for it to be water permeable, even though now the water is not getting through, that would be a reason. He has other cheshbonot as well. But the idea of using something that's water permeable, even if right now the water isn't getting through, makes it, it's something that would say it's not a chatzitza chatzitza problem, and that's exactly this question as well. You put something that's ano mino, you put this type of a bast or whatever, this permeable thing in the base. The blood doesn't hit the actual base of the kli, but if you leave it long enough, it'll seep through. Is that a chatzitza or not? So because it's something different, it's chotzetz. Oh, ain't chotzetz or not? And now we're going to spell out. Since it is mechalchel, it is porous, and the blood will eventually seep through. It's not chotzetz. Oh, maybe it doesn't matter. Right now, the blood has to hit the vessel. He said to him, Tanina, we taught a Mishnah by Paraduma. If you dropped a sponge into the water of the Paraduma, okay, then okay, you can't use the water that's in the sponge. The water that's in the sponge is not, touching the what do you call it? The bottom of the vessel. It's not water yet. It's absorbed in the sponge.
You can squeeze it back down into the vessel.
Well, I don't know, but anyway, you can use the rest of the water that's in the vessel. Now, why can you use the rest of the water that's in the vessel? Some of that water is on top of the sponge, and it hasn't touched the base of the vessel. So why can you use it? Okay, so it says, 1 minute. Okay. So the Gemara says like this. So shani maya de klishi. Now that's different. Water is very what's the opposite of viscous? It's very thin. It's very non-viscous. So anyway, so water will easily seep through something. So therefore, we agree to the principle of porous. In principle, porous is not a chatzitza if something will easily seep through it. But if it will only go over a long period of time, it's very viscous, and only come after a long period of time, maybe that is considered a chatzitza. So we're not sure. Basically, we agree to the principle. The question is one of degree. Igadami, others say, hachi pashit le. No, actually, if he did conclude, bidam kasher, if you want to use this for blood, it's fine, because the blood will seep through eventually. Bekomet's puzzle. But if you have your vessel lined with this, what do you call it? What do you call it, Charlie? Bast, whatever. This palm, leaf. If you put it for the hand breath for the mincha, that's no good because that's a solid. So for solids, it is a chatzitza. For liquids, it's not. Since eventually it will get through, it is not considered. And again, this is a very important principle by Hilchos Chatzitza, that something that is water permeable, even if the water won't get through immediately, is not considered to be a chatzitza, since eventually it could get through.
So Talmud is saying you can't prove it from water because water is.
You can't prove it from water, but the end of the decision was, actually, you know what? We're fine. Blood and water will be the same. It's a liquid. Eventually, you'll get through. So the Gemara concludes very leniently: A, that this isn't a chatzitza. B, min b'mino isn't a chatzitza. C, not only that, but even derech sheirus bekach, it's not considered a problem in the act of sheirus. Now, this one of the Tosfos asks on this. I want to just point out an important idea that there's a Gemara in Sukkah that talks about what happens if I make a handle on my, like I use a what do you call it, a handkerchief to make a handle for my lulav, and I stick my lulav in it, like in this like handle that I've made, and I hold my lulav like that. So the Gemara wants to know that maybe that's not a chatzitza, because it's because this is like it's lekicha yidei davar acher. I'm taking it via something else, so that's also considered an act of lekicha. By the way, the reason we make the whole accordion things for whatever is because it's all out of the lulav thing, so it's min b'mino. But the Gemara there suggests, right, that would not be a problem. So Tosfos says, so why here? Why here do we have this whole issue? Why isn't it just lekicha yedei davar acher? So Tosfos says, well, maybe it makes a difference, right? Am I using the thing as a handle, or am I actually trying to hold the thing, but something is in the way? So he says, for example, here, can I use this for a second? If this were my vessel, and this was the vessel in the vessel, so if I was holding it like this, right, that would be lekicha yedei davar acher. I'm just using the outer vessel as a handle, and then that should be okay. The problem is that when I hold it like this, it's the same act I would be doing if the vessel was directly in my hand, and now something is interfering. So how you hold it, is it lekicha yedei davar acher, or is it trying to take the thing, but something else is in the way? That's one difference. But then he says a very important other difference. Lekicha yedei davar acher is describing the act. The Torah, when it says by taking the lulav, it says ulekachtem lachem. It never says your hand has to touch the lulav. It just says ulekachtem lachem. What does it mean to take something? Does it mean to directly touch it? Or maybe if I take it through with a handle, I'm also taking it. Okay? So maybe it's not an issue of chatzitz at all. Maybe it's just an issue of defining the act of lakicha. Well, is that a lakicha? Am I taking something when it's in its case? Maybe not, but maybe yes when it's in a handle. But there, conceptually, it's only about the act. Like when the Gemara moved on to say it's about considered derech sherus. By serving in the Beis Hamikdash, it's more than just the act of sherus and the act of taking the blood. It's the idea of the physical contact, and that's more of an issue of chatzitza than just an issue of an act. So if you look at the last line of Tosos Min B'Mino, he says like this. He says, or two lines from the bottom. Ritzva tirates. First word is tirates. Even if you took it through like another, lekicha yedei davar acher, you used it as a handle. Why? Even if a handle is okay by lulav, it's taking it through something. Fine. If you make it like a handle, mikri lekicha, it's still, you took it, so you took the lulav because you used it through a handle. But gabi klisharis tichsi v'lakach hakohen, the kohen must take. The point is, you need ba'atzmo shel kohen. Lo mikri lekicha ba'atzmo shel kohen. There, the idea is the kohen has to be in contact with it. So by the lulav, it's just what constitutes an act of taking. Is taking something directly, or can you take it with a handle? So you still said I took it. Fine, I took it. But that's different than saying I touched it. By the klisharis, it's like you have to directly touch the thing. And therefore, the question there is much more one of chatzitza than it would be by other things, because there's a requirement of directly touching. Like by the mikvah, it's your body touches the water. Their issues of chatzitza are much more heightened than they are when we require an act of taking, where, okay, chatzitza might be a problem, but it's only a problem because it defines it maybe that you didn't take it. Not because that there's a requirement that it be directly in contact.
What if you say that the Kohen himself has to actually take it? They're not going to get the movement by Silta. He puts his hands under hers and they wave it. So he's not actually taking it then.
Okay, so there I'm all right. I mean, yeah, there's some times that the act is that's true by the tnufa, but let me look at that. Let me check into that. Okay, so let's take a look now. Turn to the Amud Bet, and now bigger daf, no tosos. Okay, let's take a look.
Rabbi, the Mechalchel, you translated as chorus?
Yeah.
I was thinking B'tischat Chalam HaKavod. I was like, we're filling with that word.
Oh, how do they translate it there? I thought it meant like something can flow through. It has the ability for something to flow through. Yeah, maybe. Right, the blood flew to it, but although tachal normally it means like tremble.
The Gemara defines it a line later. I think that's the zolei kohole. In other words, that's whatever mechalchel means.
It means the liquid gets through. How do they translate it there? Okay, anyway, let's take a look now. Next myth.
You're saying simon for the top. Noah, water.
Oh, okay. Well said. Okay. So now we talked about mixing it, but now we talked about doing the blood separate. But this Mishnah on the horns, but this Mishnah is actually going to look at the pasuk. What is it translated? What do you translate? Pour it. Is what the pasuk says. Now, which mizbeach is lifnei Hashem? There are two mizbeachs. Them mizbeach hazav. That's the golden altar, okay? Because Asher Lifnei Hashem means closest to the Kodesh Kodashim, the golden altar. And also we know from the other cases by, when you did something that the blood was done inside the Heichal, that it would be on the golden altar. Hidchil mechatei v'yored. You would begin to put the blood on the corners, mechatei because it's a chatat, so the verb for putting the blood is called mechatei, and yored, that your finger would move in a downward motion, and we'll discuss that. Mehechan hu matchil. Where do you begin? Mikar Mizrachit Tzfonit, you start at the northeast, Tzfonit Maravit, northwest, Maravit Dromit, southwest, Dromit Mizrachit, southeast. Okay? Makam Shu Matchil B'chatat, where you begin by a chatas, al Mizbech HaChitzon, on the outer altar, Mishama Yagomer al Mizbech HaPnimi, that's where you would finish on the inner altar. So what does that mean? It means, okay, so this is, how is it? It's yeah. Okay. Okay. let's talk for a minute about the outer altar. Right? If you remember the outer altar, you go to the top, you turn right, which is counterclockwise, and you come down. So here, where do you end? On which corner? You end at the southwest corner, right? Is that clear? Yes? It's the southeast, etc. Now here, it says, where does it say you start? Mikaren Mizrachit Tzfonit, so northeast, and then you do what? Then northwest, right? Mizrachit Tzfonit Tzfonit Maravit. So here, you also go counterclockwise. You start here, and you end here. So so you end at the southeast. So it says Makom Shehu. Did I do that right? Makom Shehu Matchia B'Chatat on Mizbeach Hachitzon. You start in the southeast. Sham Hayagomer on Mizbeach HaPnimi. Okay. So you also do counterclockwise, but you start at this corner. Now, why do you start at this corner? Right? Why would you start at one of the first ones that you hit? So here we're going to say, because it says V'yatsa El HaMizbeach. So V'yatsa means you get completely outer from your zone. You leave that zone, and you're now at the outer section. So the outer is you come out here, and you start here, and then you go counterclockwise.
Out to the southeast also.
Now, why? So there's going to be an opinion.
Right.
The southeast could be another place to start.
It would
So
make
we'll
more
see
sense
about
ever
that.
since the entrance is on the
All right,
side.
so we'll see all of that. We'll see all of that. Okay. So Rabbi Eliezer says, "Bimkomo haya omedu mechatei." You would not actually walk around the altar, but you would stand where you were standing, and it was small. It was an amma by an amma, as it was the whole size of the golden altar was the size of a horn of the outer altar. Okay, so he says you could just stand there and do the whole thing. You don't have to walk around. Okay, Valkulan hayanosei milmata lemala. Chutz mizo shaisa lefanav shayanosin milmala lamata. Now this is still within Rabbi Eliezer that he would have you standing in one place. So he says on all of them.
Disagreeing with this. It's like a ton of comments that you walk around, right?
But we'll see that. And he did. You could have said right. It meant you'd be matzil and pudding. But anyway, but implicitly is, and we'll see that tomorrow. Now in all of them you would put from top to bottom. Except from this one, which is in front of you, which you would put. I'm sorry, all of them you put from bottom to top. Except from this one, you put from top to bottom. What's the reason? So basically, the altar is 2 amas high, which is about About 3 feet. So 3 feet apparently, I don't know, I didn't measure. It's apparently higher than your normal arm height. Is that right?
No.
No. Rashi says it is. Oh, maybe I don't know. Maybe
3 feet is like this table.
Maybe 3 feet plus the horns.
Those are your waist, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
your waist. I don't know. Rashi says that you have to be having your arm up at an angle.
Maybe people were shorter back then.
Maybe there was the corner.
Or maybe he holds by a larger depth.
So assuming, I'm going to assume like Rashi, it's right, because this would clearly have to be like 4 feet, 5 feet anyway, that you have to start high up, not like this. So then he says like this. Then he says, if you are close to yourself, close here, so how would it work? He said all of them, it would be from the bottom up, but if I'm here and I'm going from the bottom up like this, I'm trying to do it this way, the blood is going to, or this way, if you do the bottom up, then the blood is going to like run down. So therefore he says the one near me I have to do the top bottom, but the ones farther away I would do bottom up. But if I'm right near me and my arm is angled, if my arm was like that I could do it, right? But if my arm is like this, then the blood is going to run down. What?
What is the blood? Is there
in a cleat?
Column, right?
No, he's holding it. No, he's holding it now.
Didn't we say that?
Yeah, he had it on the column temporarily when he was switching, but now he's mixed them and he's holding it.
He's going to put his hands in.
Yeah, but you don't. But you can put your finger in and do it if you're careful. You can put your finger in. So take a look at the Rashi. Rashi where he says.
One fingertip, you're going to get enough for 4 corners.
So you dip again, okay. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, it's about 8 lines down in the narrow lines. Lo haya mekifo beraglo, sharei kulo eino ela amal ama merubat. V'kiven she'ein shlosha kronot smuchos lo yochel yitain milmata lemala. So the ones that are farther, he can do from bottom up. Chutz mizo, shu omed etzla, shehi lefanav, the one that's right in front of him. She evshelo litzadei roshe etzbaotav lemata. You can't, again, presumably if you're going from bottom up, then your palm is facing upwards, okay? And you can't do that. Ela lemala. Because so your finger will be upward. Right? So if you're going like this, right, then the blood is going to flow down like that. So you have to go like now. Theoretically, you could do this, but Rashi is assuming that if you're going bottom up, you're doing it like this, and top walk down, you're going like that. So if it's right in front of you, you're afraid that if you do this type of a motion, the blood will run down, so you have to do it like that. Okay, which is why the first opinion said mechatei v'yored, because the first one that says you would walk around would have you doing it, every corner would be in front of you. You'd be directly in front of each corner. So again, the only way to do it in a clean way would be this. If you did it in this way, in the corner right in front of you, there would be a concern that it would get onto your garments.
His sleeves were tight around his wrist?
Oh, I don't know. I also always assumed they were loose.
If they're loose, it puts his finger in his finger.
That's true. All right. Okay. He's sprinkled on the purity of the altar. We'll see what that means 7 times. Right? It says, the pasuk says, what does it say? It says you should sprinkle on it 7 times. That's ba'o. It doesn't say where on it. Then it says v'tiharo v'kidusho mitubo b'nei Israel. So borrowing that language of tihar, we're saying you sprinkle on the tihar of the Torah of the mizbeach. Not clear what that means. We will see. The rest of the blood would be poured at the base, the western base of the outer altar, because you come out here, so you hit the western base first, and you pour it on the western base, right? That's what the pasuk says. Okay, it actually just says, does it say to do the blood, or we just learned it out from elsewhere? It doesn't actually. Does it say? It doesn't say here. Right here. 1 minute. Yeah, it doesn't say here that you pour the blood out, but it says it elsewhere by the inner chataot that you pour the blood at the base. But when you had blood left from this altar, you would do it on the southern base, because you would come here, you'd come around, you'd come down, and the base closest to you when you would come down would be the southern base. So here you do the western base, that's what you hit first, and here you would do the southern base. Okay. All the bloods, doesn't matter which base you pour them in, they would all eventually mix together and go through the funnel that was in the trough in the floor of the Azara. The Yotzim L'Nachal Kidron would go out to the Wadi of Kidron. That's where that's where like the pipe, as it were, the sewage pipe would empty out into. V'nim Karm L'Ganan, it would be sold to farmers. L'Zevel, for use for what do you call it? For fertilizer, because very high in nutrients. But until they actually paid for it, there was still a prohibition of mi'ila, because this was sanctified blood. We will discuss that not today, but tomorrow. Okay, let's take a look at the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, v'yatzal mizbeach, ma'al talmud omer. What does it mean to go out? We find this was one of the other things that are done on the inside, not on Yom Kippur, an ox that would be brought because everybody sinned based on a ruling of the Beis Din. We find there that the actual sprinkling, now this is a shocker, the sprinkling, when the Kohen does it for the par, the ox that's brought for all the mitzvot, he stands here and he sprinkles 7 times. Now remember, he doesn't have to hit the parochet, which is a good thing, although yesterday we did have a position of Rabbi Eliezer that he did hit the parochet. And if you remember, this whole thing here is 40 amos, right? This is 20 amos, this is 40 amos, right? Remember that, right? So that's a lot, and this is towards the front. That's a long way to be trying to get blood, according to Rabbi Eliezer. I don't know how he did it. He stands out here and he sprinkles in that direction. Okay, so
he's got to go over the mizbeach.
Yeah, I mean he does it towards. Right, again, other than Rabbi Eliezer, you didn't have to hit. So, but okay, so we'll see how we know that in a minute. Yachol Avzekain, maybe this on Yom Kippur the Kohen Gadol has to stand outside the Mizbeach when he sprinkles on the paroches. Talmud Lomar v'yatsa el Mizbeach. No, it's after he sprinkles on the paroches, then he goes outside the Mizbeach. Heichan Haya, where was he until this point when he was doing the paroches? Lifnimi na Mizbeach, on the inner part of the altar, between the altar and the paroches, and only afterwards is he v'yatsa, does he go outside. So that's discussing it from the perspective of Yom Kippur. Now we're going to say the same thing from the perspective of the par of Kol HaMitzvahs. Tanya Idach, we taught it in another brisa. Lifnei Hashem ma Talmud lomar. Why does it say before God? Right? V'yatzal mizbeach asher lifnei Hashem. Amar Rabbi Nechemia. Lefisha metzim beparvas yosh Yom Kippurim. Because on Yom Kippur we know shekoin omed lifnei min hamizbeach. He's on the inside, as we said. Only after he's done is it v'yatzah. Umazeh ala paroches, b'shash umazeh. So, and he sprinkles on the paroches when he's doing that part. He's between the paroches and the mizbeach. Yachol avzeke, maybe it's true also by the par of Kol HaMitzvot. Talmud lomar, mizbach Torah tasamim lifnei Hashem asher ba'oel moed. So it says, he shall sprinkle on the mizbeach of the Ketores, which is before God. So, mizbeach lifnei Hashem. The mizbeach is before God. The en kohen lifnei Hashem, but the kohen isn't before God, even when he does the sprinkling on the parochas. HaKetzad, how would it be? Omer chutz mizbeach umazeh, he stands outside and does the sprinkling. Now, the funny thing about that is that that's what it says when he gets to the mizbeach, right? The pasuk in Vayikra, where it speaks about that, says, right, the tavalo kohen et bo min adam, v'zah sheva pamim lifnei Hashem as pnei paroches, u'min adam yiteino kohen mizbeach asher lifnei Hashem. So when he's putting the blood on the horns, it says Hamizbeach Asher Lifnei Hashem. It didn't say that when he said he sprinkled on the parochas. Nevertheless, we learn out that the Mizbeach, and for not for Yom Kippur, but for the par of all mitzvot, the Mizbeach is always Lifnei Hashem. He's always here. So even when he does the 7, he's standing here, and then he does it. Whereas on Yom Kippur, he does the 7 on the altar here, and then he comes out and he does the Mizbeach. Okay? That's the V'yatzah. Okay. Hitka mechateh v'yoreh. On Yom Kippur, he does the 7 and the 1 standing here, right? He does 1 and 7, and then he does another 1 and 7 for the par, and then this here, right? And then he mixes them, right? That's what we had. They get mixed, the one vessel. Okay, he mixes it, right? And then the yatzah, and then he does this. That he's standing here when he does the 7 and 1. Okay, and then it's v'yatzah el mizbeach. Yatzah el mizbeach. Okay, as opposed to by the other things, he stands here. And even when he's there, which, by the way, besides the issue of distance, again, emphasizing the greater intimacy and the greater closeness that you get on Yom Kippur, it's important to note that difference. Okay, yeah.
All the blood goes through the floor.
When they spill it out here.
So the
Actually said
There's a drain.
What?
Where is the drain on the inside?
There is no drain. There was only a few drops.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mix.
No, that just
Yeah,
stays
it's
unless.
only the outer.
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's
they-
all the stuff they would pour. It's all the stuff they would pour on the base. It's not the stuff they would put on the horns up here didn't get mixed. That would stay on the horns. I don't know if they would ever wash them.
What
think
was
there's a
left
channel
over.
in the
Yeah.
There's a drain in the
Oh,
base.
yeah, but that's for the
So
wine.
it's
That
not
wasn't for
left
the
over
blood.
the inside.
What?
The inside was there.
Yeah, the blood is just.
Left over
Yeah, I don't know if they would ever wash it.
Drops.
I don't know.
So he didn't spill that. left
No,
over.
No.
he
He spilled it out
inside.
here. It says he comes out here and he spills it on the Yesod Hadromi. This is what
Pours it,
pours it.
Yeah, and that supposedly finds its
Yeah.
way.
Somehow there's a channel. I don't know where the channel is. Somehow, it finds its way here and then it goes out, right? Yeah.
When the Kohen goes standing to the east of the inner altar, the inner altar of incense,
Yes.
do you think, and he's sprinkling towards the baroque, do you think he's standing north or south of the actual altar, or do you think he's sprinkling right over the altar towards
Yeah,
the
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know. You mean by the other thing, by the Par Helam Davar?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
People drink the water that from the stream.
I was wondering that too. So how do
The
they get to
blood
drink
that
it?
went
The
into the
Gichon.
stream.
Right.
They
They use it for fertilizer.
drinking.
The drink-
For drinking.
After it came out of the base of Mikdash, after it had the
But
sewage of the base of
it
Mikdash?
would merge. It would get. They used water. There wasn't so much free water
Yeah.
in Israel.
I don't know.
It's-
I imagine that this wasn't the stream, that some water from the stream was diverted here, and then it became like a sewage pipe. It didn't mean that this was the whole stream.
We're
That's
saying using
not
the
what
Nafal
it
Kidron.
says. It says it ends up in Nafal
I understand.
Kidron,
The
so
sewage
people
pipe
drinking
emptied.
that
I don't
water.
understand the problem. Here's her bias, right? Here's the
Throwing
sewage. Here's the
into
sewage
a,
pipe. It
reservoir.
enters into Nachal Kidron,
Everybody
and
did
that's
that.
just the sewage. That doesn't mean that's the whole stream.
People
That's just the
are-
sewage.
Everybody did that until about 100 years.
Anyway, I don't understand the problem. I don't understand the problem. That's the sewage. That's the water that was diverted for the sewage. It doesn't.
I don't have to pay to drink my water.
Yes, when it goes out to Nachal Kidron, the end of the Mishnah is it goes out to Nachal Kidron. There's a treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash standing there, collecting that and selling everything that comes out to gardeners to use as fertilizers. That's what the Mishnah says.
But if I'm downstream and I just want to have a cup of water, I have to pay the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash to drink water. It also makes me water.
No, this is just what the runoff of the sewage.
It doesn't. He's saying it doesn't.
Nachal is a wadi. Nachal is a wadi. Nachal is not a river. Nachal is a wadi. It is not a river. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
We're not talking that it goes into another water source.
Free flowing stream, right?
No, it is a sewage pipe that enters into a wadi, not into a water source, and that sewage is collected and sold to gardeners.
You're saying Nachal is a man-made pipe?
No, Nachal is a wadi, not a river.
Nachal Kidron does not have water flowing
Right.
through it all the year.
But when it does have,
Okay, so
like in the rainy season.
so
like-
apparently,
I don't know what would be when that water flowing through it.
barrels or something at the ends of this pipe.
Yeah, exactly.
That caught
Right.
all the runoff from the
Right.
lift house, and then there was a little guy with a table, measuring cups and hose nine, and he was like selling to
Right.
the gardeners.
But yes, the
Rainy
difference.
season,
Okay,
the water would flow through the
right. The lack of
Nachal.
clarity was that the Nachal was basically a dry wadi. Okay, let's read a little bit more.
That's the way it feels.
Tanu Rabbanan. Hitchem echatev yored. Hitchem echatev yored. Mehechan hayam matchil. Mikaren mizrachit dromit. So it's southeast. Dromit maravit. Southwest. Maravit tzfonit. Northwest. Tzfonit mizrachit. Northeast. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. So this is a different position. This starts in the southeast. Okay, so this position starts in the southeast, and then what would it go after the southeast? Dromit Maravit. So then it would go southwest. So this position would actually start here, and rather than this, which would go this way and start here, this position would start in the southeast and go this way, and it would go in the opposite direction. Okay, so what is that debate going to be? So let's just see if we can quickly see that. Okay, Divrei Rabbi Akiva. I'm sorry, Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yosef Glili Omer Mikaren Mizrachit Tzfonit. No, he would start northeast, like we had said, Tzfonit Maravit, and he would go counterclockwise. Northwest, Maravit, Dromit, southwest, Dromit, Mizrachit, southeast. Malcolm Rabbi Yosef Glili Matchia, where Rabbi Yosef Glili would begin. Sham, Rabbi Akiva, Posei, that's where Rabbi Akiva would end. Okay? Malcolm Rabbi Akiva Machia, where Rabbi Akiva would begin. Sham, Rabbi Yossi Gaglili Posei. Okay. So what is this about? So the Chuliyama Mia, about who carried the Pagabaresha low of it. Everybody agrees you did not start with the first corner you hit, because that would have been one of the ones on the west, not the ones on the east. So my time, why? Amar Shmuel Damar Kra, V'yatsa el Mizbech, to exit to the altar. Adinafik Mikul Mizbech, you have to be outside. Okay, so now, fine, but that's how it's being read. Rabbi Akiva, now we have two questions. A, why is one north and one south? And also, why is one clockwise and one's counterclockwise? So if you remember, we always assume counterclockwise, like we do here. So why is Rabbi Akiva going clockwise? Rabbi Akiva, nekuf derech yamin, go counterclockwise. So Lema, Rami Bar Yecheskel, maybe they debate Rami Bar Yecheskel. Amar Rami Bar Yecheskel, Yam Shasa Shlomo, the Yam of Shlomo, the big, mikvah that Shlomo had in the base of Mikdash. So what does the pasuk say? Omeid Shnei Masar Bakar was on these 12, figures of cattle, like molten cattle. Shlosh Panim Tzafona, 3 north. Shlosh Panim Yama, 3 west. Shlosh Panim Negba, 3 south. Shlosh Panim Mizracha, 3 east. So if you think about it, going from the north to the west, that's your counterclockwise movement. So that pasuk shows you counterclockwise. And their backs, their tuchuses were all like inner. They were, the heads were facing out. Fine. Okay. Halamarata. From there you learn that you're always turning to the right and turning to the east. So maybe this is debated. Maybe Rabbi Akiva doesn't believe in the general idea of turn to the right, of counterclockwise.
Purple line?
No, yeah, that's clockwise. That's clockwise, not counterclockwise. No. It's always seen as you're facing on the inside. Mar Islay to Rabbi Bar Yecheskel. Maybe one holds like Rabbi Bar Yecheskel. Mar Leislay to Rabbi Yecheskel. Is it possible that Rabbi Akiva basically rejects the idea of counterclockwise? And says, no. Everybody agrees the general rule is counterclockwise. One, the question is, do you say what's true out in the Azara, in the Azara is true in the innermost sanctum, in the Heichal. So yes, that's true outer in the Mizbeach, the Yama Shlomo. There it's counterclockwise. Inside it's different, which is bizarre. Why should the direction change? Umar Sava lo yafinam panim michutz. Okay, so that's one explanation. Rabbi Akiva says the Gemara, and fine, you don't have to learn it from the outside. But you should at least be allowed to go counterclockwise. You should be allowed to do either way. It sounds like he says dafka, you have to do it clockwise. Why is that? So Amalacha Rabbi Akiva, and with this we'll end. Midina behu keren de paga bereisha bu avi bereisha. You know what? Because you should have started, when you were walking out, you should have started with the one you bumped into first. The halacha was you had to go to the outside, but this was the first one you encountered. Okay? The Amareish Lakish, ein ma'avir na mitzvahs. You're not supposed to pass by an opportunity to do a mitzvah. The Milo Avid, why did you not start this corner, which is the one you hit first? Mishum dichsiv, v'yatzal mizbeach, that you have to go out. Adinafik mikula mizbeach. The kima the yoibahu keren. So since this is the first one you encountered, you're forced to go out, you're forced to start here, but the next place you should be going is back to the place that you missed. Now, by the way, for Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it also works, because since he's saying you do it in the north, you bump into this, you don't do it, you start here, but then you go back to the one you missed. So for Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he can go immediately back to the one he missed and go with the standard counterclockwise. But for Rabbi Akiva, that has you in the south, to be going back to the one you missed has you going in the clockwise direction. So the only debate we have to figure out now is not clockwise versus counterclockwise. That we get. You're going back to the one you missed. But why one of them starts in the north and one of them starts in the south. So we will see that tomorrow.
How do we explain pani michutz?
I got the inside, the heichal from chutz, from the outside, the azar. I got to tell you. I think that was